Hey everybody, it's Romania Black, and we are on Volume 3 of Heaven Official's Blessing, chapters 71 to 73. So yeah, I actually waited a whole week this time after reading those chapters with old Long Ying and Shi Lian and the whole deal with Yong'an coming up. Yeah, I waited a whole week because I was anticipating, I had been told that there was a slight slim chance that Manhua chapter 87 would be coming out around this time, but sadly it has been delayed, which is fine. So we're not going to get a Manhua chapter this week. Sad days, but that's okay. We'll get it next week. So I'm actually okay with the Manhua chapters coming out a little bit later because sadly I found out, as I think that I don't know if it's on my notes here, but I sadly found out through the Discord that the Manhua, the volume, I guess they do volumes that they release for the Manhua, and it's going to be ending with chapter 89. So we really only have 3 more chapters of the Manhua left. And then Star Ember is going to be taking a hiatus and then coming back later with volume, I guess, 8 of the Manhua and the new set of chapters there, which I've been told is like 12 chapters per volume. So that's really sad. I'm like, oh, no. But on the same token, it'll be all right. We still have the novel to get through. We have several volumes of the novel, if you can see back there. We at least have volume 4 back there still. And I have volume 5 coming in the mail, and we'll have volume 6, 7, and 8 next year. So we got a lot to get through. So we got plenty of time, plenty of reading to do. The Donghua, whenever it decides to come out, whenever China decides that it's okay for 2 guys to maybe touch hands for 5 seconds, we'll get that Donghua season. But yeah, I'm like, there's not even anything that really goes on in volume 2 or that would go on in season 2, honestly. There's not really. They just gaze at each other longingly and hold a meat bun and Hua Chong sexily eats it. I mean, there's not anything crazy there. Come on, you can pass it off as being heterosexual. Sure, tell yourself that. But I made some tea. I'm ready to read these 3 chapters and see what we get, right? So we're going to go with that. But I am excited to be in volume 3 with you all and to be talking about these chapters. But I do have some comments before we start. Since I did wait around for the Manhua chapter to come out, I was able to answer quite a lot of them, which was fun. So Marav L talks about the whole story with the 2 people in 1 cup and asks, like, would splitting the cup between the 2 parties really help both parties, or would they both end up being, would there be too much scarcity between both? I'll be honest, I hate metaphors like these because in my head, my brain says, well, logically, 1 cup isn't enough to satisfy them anyway for 1 person. So who cares if it's split? But I get what you're saying. And it's like, yeah, it's a hard thing. Like, do you try to help both and then neither get helped? Or do you pick one over the other? Or what do you do, right? What do you do? So it is a very hard question to answer. But I'm like, I get what you're saying. But I'm like, I don't like that metaphor anyway. But SQQLBH314 talked about how it's really sad. Shi Lian had 20 years of happiness, 17 years, then the 3 years after he ascended, and then 800 years of, and basically 780 years of pain later. So fun times. So basically, yeah, 780 years of pain, 20 years of happiness. Seems like a good trade-off, right? Seems like a fair trade-off. So I also like the idea that this novel suggests, unlike the Donghua that shows Shi Lian like looking over wistfully and then there's Junwoo in the Bash of Lightning. I like the idea that Shi Lian ascended in his PJs, his pajamas. I like it. I also like what SQQLBH314 suggests, and that is at least he was in his PJs and Junwoo did not see him naked. Thank goodness. Although Junwoo probably wouldn't have complained. Probably, it would have been really awkward though, right? Super awkward. But that did make me wonder, how many times has Junwoo gone to an ascension and they've been nude? If they've been asleep. That would have been really funny. Junwoo's like, dang it again. It's a good thing Feng Shen doesn't have that job because that could get really awkward. But I also liked the idea that 314 suggested that the devotees, they have their own ideas of what Shi Lian is to them, but they don't necessarily follow what Shi Lian tells them. Like, Shi Lian's telling them to do all these things, but they have in their mind what type of god Shi Lian is. So Shi Lian's like, and they just kind of do their own thing. The exception is, the only one who truly listens and does what he's told by Shi Lian is Hua Chong. And I'm like, oh, fun times. Interesting. Hua Chong's really the only devoted follower of Shi Lian, but he doesn't worship him. So it's interesting. Anime Annie talks about how Shilian has this giant influx of prayers, and it kind of reminds me of the English film Bruce Almighty. It's an American film. It kind of has along the same way where this guy Bruce becomes God. Sort of the same thing. And I laughed really hard at that. But Shilian obviously being mad because the royals, even if they knew about Yongen's suffering, why weren't they praying to Shilian? And we'll talk about that with Sarah Linda's comment and Miss down here below when I get to it. But yeah, if the people, the royals knew that Yongen was suffering, why haven't they been praying to Shilian to tell him about it? That's a good question. And Shilian would think that he needs to be prayed to about it because he wants to save the common people. And Longing is a perfect example of that. But we'll tie that into Sarah Linda's comment here, where Longing, he was clueless about Shilian. He didn't even know Shilian was a god, had no clue. And that's a really good thing to bring up because I had been under the assumption that, like, because there were 8,000 temples in this kingdom, that everybody knew about Shilian. I was like, well, everybody knows about him. His temples are everywhere. But if you don't let the people of Yongen into the temples and you don't tell them about him, they won't know and they won't pray to him. Which again ties to the fact that the royals, if they knew they were suffering, should have been praying to Shilian. But Sarah Linda brings up a good point. He's a martial god, not a god of rain or farming. And Kixkay kind of brings that up too. It's like he's not a god of, rain and stuff that would help the people of Yongen. He's not a farming god. He's a martial god. So why would they need to go pray to him? So that's a really good point. It, again, will tie to Shilian, who has this idea that he needs to save all of the common people. And it's like, well, what do we do with this, right? Also, I think it's interesting that it's kind of lending me to the idea that only the wealthy can pray to Shilian. Only they're deserving of Shilian's graces. And that's interesting. And then Sarah Linda brought up this idea about the temple funds being like, well, they need the temple funds because they supply the resources to the temple. They pay for the people that work there to have, a life, everything like that. And I'm like, that's true. But like I said in the discussion, there's a difference between the funds that fund that and the coins just lying in the pond. So we could debate all day about it. But I think that MXTX does a really cool job of bringing up these conversations and these topics like, well, you have a fund there. Do you just let it sit there and do what you want with it? Or do you use it to help the people who are suffering? Where do you draw the line at? Where does it go? It's interesting, right? I really liked that. Also, Anime Annie had pointed out that the two people and the one cup dilemma kind of goes along with that. And the idea that maybe they didn't pray to Yongen because they realized they didn't have all the resources to help them. So they're just letting them be the one that doesn't get the cup. I guess we're going to find out this chapter, right? Molly MIGH says that Shilian does not understand the concept of scarcity, though. He's grown up spoiled. He's had everything at his fingertips. Shilian has never had to want for anything. And I like that Molly tied to the fact that that could be established by the Goshi saying you need to go out and experience the world and see this like scarcity for yourself so that you understand it better and you will be able to, have a better idea about it if you ascend and when you ascend. But Shilian never gets to that point. So Shilian's coming at this situation from a place of privilege and being like, well, why can't we help them? We have the means, let's do it. But it's more complicated than that. And I think that's what he's about to find out in these chapters. And I'm really nervous about it because I feel like Shilian's about to get like a dose of reality and it's not going to be good. So, and again, that white calamity is looming over the horizon every second. And I'm like, So we'll see. We'll see what happens. It'd be interesting if Yongen was like the first place to develop the human face disease, if that was a thing, which would be ironic because Yongen ends up superseding Shanla in the end. So it'd be interesting. But then Kixkay points out that Shilian grabbing the black spirit in the temple with Hua Chong, or Hong Hong in this case, is very similar to him grabbing the scorpion snake back at Banyu. And I was like, oh yeah, it's very similar. Like Shilian just reaches out and grabs the spirit, grabs the scorpion snake. Same deal. And it could be a symbol of how in both situations, Hong Hong and Hua Chong, neither of them are able to help Shilian in that moment. They're rather helpless. And I liked what Kixkay said was that, in the Banyu arc, whenever Shilian, after Hua Chong sucks the poison out. He's kind of in a bad mood for the rest of that arc. He's in a bad mood for a lot of it. And Kiksuke's like, that could be because he realized that just like back at the temple back in the day, he was helpless to help the person that he cared about. He had to be saved by Shi Lian, and Shi Lian ended up getting hurt because of it. And in the present time, even though Hua Chong's become this super powerful supreme ghost, he can't save the love of his life from a measly scorpion snake. And I was like, that's great. I love it. I love it. It's perfect. That was a great thing to bring up, Kiksuke. I'm glad you did. But yeah, and then finally, the Miss Nadia talks about how hands are really apparently appreciated in China. Because I was like, there's a lot of focus on hands in this story. Like my Western ass, I'm like, there's a lot of focus on hands in this. And the Miss Nadia is like, yes, the Chinese really appreciate them. And there's a lot of focal points with them in beauty. And I was like, oh. I've had a lot of people comment on like my ideas being based on Western tradition. Yes. I'm from America. I am very driven in my morals and ideals from Western tradition. I try to be as open-minded as I can, but that's my background. That's just my personal experience. So a lot of the things that I will say will have basis in that. So just to forewarn you. I swear I'm being as open-minded as I can. But I like Miss Nadia had a lot of cultural things that they talked about in their comment for part 18 that was really cool in discussing how there are differences between Western and Eastern cultures and the way that they look at things. I'm all about learning about that because I think that's fascinating. So thank you. But yeah, those are my comments. Those are my comments. And I'm pretty excited to sit down and start part 20 of our journey. We're officially in part 20s, in the 20s of our journey through Heaven Official's Blessing, chapters 71 through 73. We've been doing 20 weeks of this. I'm excited, very excited indeed. This journey is going to take us more than a year, I'm sure, to get through it, but it will be worth it in the end, right? Right. All right. But we are going to start our journey reading and see what all we get, right? I'm pretty excited. So, with that being said, we are going to start chapter 71 through 73 of Heaven Official's Blessing, and we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1, and let's go. All right. I've conveniently got this file saved that when I pull it up, it ends at the very end of the last chapter, and then we start chapter 71. God of Heaven interferes in mortal matters. Well, that's about as blunt as you can get it. There's not a lot of interpretation with that title. Shi Lian's about to go wreck shit. Cool. Great. Mount Taisang, the Crown Prince Summit. All right. The time of day when visitors can no longer linger and were asked to leave in droves. Oh, so everybody's going out of the temples and being driven away. Oh, and the 4 Goshi were leading the service beneath the feet of the 5-meter-high golden divine statue. Apparently someone commented that there's not 5-meter-high golden divine statues in all of the 8,000 temples. I'm glad that you all established that because that was, again, extremely excessive. Although Qirong's 500 lanterns, still excessive. Within the Temple of the Crown Prince, on either side of the walls were numerous everlasting lamps in rows that hung from the ground to the ceiling. Oh, see, I don't know if the anime will be, or the Dongwon will be able to do this justice, because just imagining all of these, like, I'm ready for Star Ember to draw it, to see all the lamps, like, on an entire wall. Oh. He descended from the sky, lightly landing on the altar, and seated himself in a position right before his own statue. Oh, I could just imagine this. Just visualizing this. Painting a picture, MXTX. Painting a picture. And countless lamps spun gently with this breeze. The cultivators looked up, voicing their awe, and whispered amongst themselves. Oh, the Goshi who are sitting with their seats, with their eyes closed. Oh. The other 3 deputy Goshi couldn't see Shi Lian's form, but could guess something had descended. So they departed the hall. And so, he was waiting for, May. So it was May that can see him. Did you know about the drought in Yongin? There had been no word from father. Did something happen at court, or is he unaware of what's happening? Oh. There were exceptional cases, such as Goshi, religious ministers, or high-level cultivators. Those who had cultivated to certain levels were representatives of heavenly officials in the mortal realm, and Shilian could speak directly to the Goshi. The no prostrating within the temple of the Crown Prince rule was thus dictated through the mouth of the Goshi from Shilian. Okay. He thought originally there were some exceptional circumstances that made the king unable to free himself to handle the disaster at Yongin, or that the king had no idea the situation had worsened to the point of massive death. Unexpectedly, however, the Goshi replied, His Majesty the King is doing well. Nothing major has happened, and he knows very well of what's happening in Yongin. I've never heard him pray for Yongin, not even a word. Shilian's about to get a bad dose of reality, and this is not going to be good. Even if he didn't get along well with his father, he knew he was not a fatuous leader. He may have seen himself as high above others as the son of God and regarded hierarchy highly, but that didn't mean he wouldn't care for refugees. This has nothing to do with His Majesty. It was I who advised that he nor the Queen mention Yongin in their prayers. Why? Because it's pointless. What do you mean pointless? His mind worked it out. Are you saying because I'm a martial god with no control over droughts, telling me would be pointless? Did you mention that I may be martial god, but I'm also the crown prince? My people are in trouble. How can I sit back and do nothing? The most important thing right now is to save the disaster victims and take care of them. Please speak to my father on my behalf to stop constructing any more temples. There are already too many temples of the crown prince in this kingdom. I don't need them. And those golden statues, they can be melted down to help fundraise for the disaster. Yongin sits in the west. They need water. We can dig a canal, irrigate the waters from the east, water the crops and nourish the land. It's too early. It's too early. What's too early? Do you understand now why I said you shouldn't ascend too early? It's because your people haven't died out completely yet. What are you saying? What do you mean my people haven't died out completely yet? You've already become a god, but you can't forget who you were as a mortal, unable to let and differentiate between the two realms. You're involving yourself, but you are also powerless. And in the end, it will only result in an utter mess. Oh. And the Goshi stood below. And even though it was obvious Shilian was the one looking down, when the Goshi spoke, it was as if he was the one above. How can I be powerless? As long as I act, there'll be results. Every small bit counts. Even if I could save but one, it's still better than not doing anything. If you won't speak for me to my father, then I will go seek him out myself. Oh, do you know why heavenly officials can't show themselves before mortals at will? There's a reason behind that thousands of years rule. Don't do anything foolish. Then what can I do? If I can't do this, I can't do that. Goshi, there are people dying right now in my land. Aren't gods called gods because they can save the people? If I don't appear now, then when can I appear? What would be the meaning of my ascension? Do you know what I've seen? I've seen your future, and it's pitch black. Then you must have seen wrong. I only like to wear white! Oh my god! Ah! That comeback! Oh my god! I worry that you, not only will you be unable to save your people, they will turn around and drag you down from the divine altar. My people aren't like that. They can clearly recognize what's right and wrong. If I can't save them, then there'd be no meaning to me being on this altar anyway. What your father has done can't be said to be right, but it can't be said to be wrong either. You said to fundraise, but it's not like your father hasn't tried. And you can go see how that ended. You said to dig a canal to irrigate the waters, then go see that river for yourself as to whether it could be done. Oh. Okay, I see where this is heading. The river's not going to be enough to feed them. That's the cup. Y'all trying to spoil me. That's the cup. The scarcity. There's not enough to water them. Okay. Upon leaving Mount Taisang, he headed westward and arrived at the city of Yongin. In the 20 years of his life, Shilian had never thought the sun to be so scorchingly deadly. The first step he made upon that earth, he could already feel how wretchedly hot and dry it was, like everything in the air had been contorted. The blazing sun above the land had already been cracked into broken chunks, horrifyingly aged. There was a deep gutter that seemed to have been a river once, but had already dried up to the bottom, and the blackened riverbed was emitting a strange stench. He walked for a long time and didn't see a single field. Maybe there were fields once, but they were unrecognizable at this point. Oh, and there's Fangshan and Muqing. Any news? He's flapping the front of his shirt to fan himself. Yes, in the past 2 years, the whole Western Territory has experienced a water shortage. It finally erupted this year. Yongin is the worst affected. The river's dried and the rain doesn't fall, so the crops won't grow. The wealthier families are still faring all right. As long as there's money, then food and water can be bought from elsewhere. However, most of the wealthy have already moved to the Eastern Territories. Those who are left are either poor or handicapped. The Goshi said my father didn't just sit back. He also gave a command to send disaster relief. So why is it still so serious? Muqing said coldly. When funds go through government checkpoints, each checkpoint will skim off an amount. Until finally there's nothing left. Of course it's still this serious. If it were up to me, it would have been better not to have sent anything rather than feed those parasites. Oh. And he forced his anger down. Shilian, I will tell those parasites to throw every cent that they've eaten back up. Your Highness, did you forget? This is not within your control. Heavenly officials can't interfere into mortal matters. 3 meters of ice weren't formed by 1 day of cold. Ah! His Majesty the King is the one responsible for the mortal realm. This is his duty, and he still couldn't deal with it. You've got your hands full of countless prayers from your devotees. How can you handle that too? Mind this, mind that. In the end, you'll only bring trouble onto yourself. Besides, that only cures the symptoms, not the root cause. And Fangshan blocked out the sun with his hand. To cure the root cause, there still needs to be water. How about your Highness ask the Goshi to tell His Majesty to irrigate the waters from the east to the west for now? I suggested it. Can't they find like a heavenly official who is responsible for rain? Can't they do that? What did the Goshi say? More or less it's not feasible, but now I've realized it really can't be done. To irrigate, we'll need to bore the river. However, something like boring for a canal requires mass conscription. Who knows how many years that'd take? And it only exhausts the people and the treasury it won't do. Distant waters can't put out nearby fires. But if this can't be solved by mortal means, maybe you can try divine methods. I heard the Rain Master has changed in recent years. The newly ascended Rain Master seems to be a reclusive person, but I'll see if I can pay a visit and request for moving waters in the east-westward in the form of rain. Ever since Shilian ascended, other than greeting Junwu, he had never personally paid any visits to the other heavenly officials, and never tried to purposely befriend anyone, treating all as equals within spiritual communication array. Him taking the initiative to pay visits was thus a rare occasion. But Muqing says no. Why not? I've investigated thoroughly. In truth, these past 2 years, it's not just Yongin or the Western Territories that were experiencing a shortage of water, but the entire kingdom of Shanla. Only the Eastern Territories are close to the sea and have surrounding lakes and ravines, so it's not as obvious and hasn't become an issue yet. At the same time, the Eastern Territories could very well fall into disaster. And Shilian's heart squeezed. And most of the population of Shanla, along with the busiest places, are all in the east. More than 3 times the size of the west, especially the royal capital. If drought was to happen there, the consequences would be way more serious than Yongin. A great number would die. There'd be a much bigger riot born from it. So is that what the Goshi meant when he said what Father did wasn't right but wasn't wrong? Only that he made a choice? So your Highness, that no one went to your temple to pray was a good thing. Leave it to His Majesty leave it to His Majesty to decide what to do. But he didn't respond and turned around. The entire time they walked, everyone he saw was nothing but skin and bones. Men and children had their upper bodies bare, rows of ribs visible and clear on their torsos, and the women bore dead eyes, their faces bereft of life. No one wanted to move. They didn't have the energy to move, and everything emitted the disgusting stench of death. making one want to scream and escape this decaying earth and return to the glory of the bustling royal capital. It was a long time before he finally said, "You two stay here and assist me. Deliver as much water as you can. Let me think on this." "Fine, go and think carefully. Just let me know what to do once you've decided." Mooching said quietly, "Your Highness, do think about this carefully. We can help 10 days, maybe 20, but not 1 or 2 years. We can save 100 lives, but not 100,000. You're a martial god, after all, not a god of water. Even if you were the god of water, you can't create water from nothing. If we can't fix the root of this problem, we can't keep going like this. This is merely an inadequate measure, like using a cup of water to douse a burning cart of firewood." It's the Banyu thing. Well, not the Banyu. It's the thing he told Lan Chanshu. He's like, what do? You can't create water from nothing. Okay. All right, let's go. Chapter 72. To meet you in the mortal realm, to find flowers beneath the rain. After hearing what Mooching said, Shilian paused briefly in his step, but he didn't turn back. He waved his hand and continued forward by himself. When he returned to the capital, he went straight to the royal palace. He didn't know why he needed to go there, since it was not exactly to see his parents. It wasn't only because of the fact that as a heavenly official, he was forbidden to reveal himself to his closest family members, but more so because in the time he had left home and in the years that had passed, he didn't really know how to initiate conversation with his parents anymore. This was probably the same for every child in the world. Okay, like you leave home and then you come back after a while and like, how do you talk to your family when you've changed, right? He concealed himself and haphazardly ran about the palace he was so familiar with. But His Majesty the King was nowhere to be seen. Finally, when he came to Chifeng Manor, he found his father and mother. The two had just dismissed the palace servants and were chatting between themselves. The queen sat on the side of the bed. The mask she was fiddling with in her hands was the very one Shilian had worn 3 years ago at the procession. Oh. It had been molded with his features. When it was seen by others, the degree of replication was almost frightening. "Come give me a head massage." Even though the king and queen had put up a front in front of the people ever since Shilian was little, he had seen clearly that behind the scenes his parents would bicker like any other normal married couple. The queen put down the mask as expected and sat down by the king's side to help massage his temples. She was combing through his hair when she suddenly said, "You've more white in your hair again." True to his mother's words, the side of his father's hair were graying. It had aged him a few years. "Didn't father visit the Royal Holy Pavilion just a while back to pray? At the time his hair was black, so why is it gray so suddenly?" "No need to see. Just dye it black again the next time we go visit Mount Taisang. It's grayed long ago, but he's been dyeing it black to make him seem like he's not aged. I've been too occupied listening to prayers of my devotees and running about. I rarely made time to come back and visit, which is why I didn't suspect anything." He was filled with guilt. For once, he was glad his parents weren't able to see him. As the queen massaged the king's head, she murmured, "I told you to rest early every day, yet you never listen to me, and even say that I nag you night and day. Now look at you, and how unseemly you've become. If our son saw you, he definitely wouldn't want anything to do with you. Ever since your son grew up and his wings toughened, he stopped caring about me anyway." He couldn't help but take a peek at the copper mirror at the bedside and muttered, "It's not that bad. Isn't it still the same face?" Shilian was speechless. He never realized that his father had had this side to him, talking bad about him behind his back with such petulant bitterness. He couldn't help but smile. "Oh, okay, it's not bad. Your health is more important than the heavens. You should rest early today." "I can't rest now. There are a number of people from Yongin that have arrived at the capital. If they want to come, that's fine, but they've stirred up trouble, making people feel uneasy. It's a tricky situation." It turns out the reason behind his father's graying hair was because of the drought at Yongin. There was an unspeakable kind of misery in Shilian's heart, and the queen nodded. "I heard from Wrong Air," I love that she calls Qirong Wrong Air, "that he met someone from Yongin today. He said that man tried to steal money from the temple. How frightening." It's shocking. If there are only tens or hundreds of them, that would be fine. But if a couple 100,000 come and go rogue all of the capital, who knows what's going to happen? That might not happen. If they follow the laws and keep to themselves, then let them come. As king of a nation, how can I take a risk with something that might not happen? Besides, they definitely can't come over. Looking after a few more people isn't simple as placing a couple more sets of chopsticks down at the table. There are many complications involved that you don't understand, so stop talking. Okay, let's not talk about this anymore. I don't understand the things you spoke of to begin with anyway. If only our son were here. He could at least help take some of the burden off of you. What can he do? As long as he doesn't cause me more worries, that's good enough. At the mention of Shilian, the king seemed to liven up again. That son of yours. He's already 10-something years old. But he was raised like a princess. Even if he knew it won't do any good, he'll just add more problems to it. It's best if he stays carefree in the heavens without knowing anything. Let him do what he wants to do. He's not the crown prince anymore. There's no need for him to care about matters in the mortal realm. Let him fly to his heart's content. He listened silently as his father ranted with growing excitement. Now, you call him a princess. Weren't you the one who spoiled our princess since he was young? And now you want to blame it all on me? That child is good at everything except for missing home. Before, when he was studying at the Royal Holy Pavilion, he'd only come back once every few months. Now that he's ascended, it's even more difficult. We haven't seen him once in 3 years. Who knows if we'll see him again? How would a woman know anything? The Goshi said those were the laws of heaven. How can we treat him like a common mortal? If you call your son back, you'd be weighing him down. I'm only just saying I won't make such demands when we're in front of him. It's not too bad looking at the statues either. They look pretty much like him, and the statues are everywhere. Oh my gosh, and Shilian seeing all of this. Oh. Shilian felt an ache in his heart and a hard lump lodged in his throat, making it painful for him to swallow. He couldn't stay hidden any longer, and yet he couldn't reveal himself either. It wasn't because he was afraid of breaking heaven's laws, but rather, even now, he didn't know what to say. As for the situation in Yongan, he didn't have any solution at the moment. If he were to suddenly appear, it would only cause his parents more agitation and stress. And so he left. He ran away. Oh, and then he calmed down. Action was better than standing around sighing. He cast a spell and transformed himself into a plainly dressed young cultivator. He ran around the capital digging for information and recording his findings. Traversing all over after a full day of work, he finally got the answers that he wanted. Indeed, the water level in all the lakes and rivers within the royal capital of Shanla was lower than the previous years. Back when he was still at the Royal Holy Pavilion, there were a few times when he snuck down the mountains to play. As he rowed his boat happily along the largest river that crossed through the kingdom of Shanla, the water level at the time was only just a tad short of the levee, yet now it had dropped several meters. On top of that, the residents of the city said it had been like that for a while. It wasn't something that happened overnight. Before this, Shilian hadn't paid much attention, but now he had. He was shocked to see all the warning signs. He'd originally hoped there'd been some mistake in Mu Qing's report and thus decided to come and see it for himself, but now he couldn't deny the fact that Mu Qing had never let him down before. I kind of have a theory of where this is headed. I'm like, it kind of goes back to the Goshi's words. I'm like, are they setting up that Shanli had to fall because it's just part of fate? It's part of the world that they fall and another kingdom takes its place, and that's just the circle of life in the world order, and Shilian doesn't get that yet? Once the situation was confirmed, Shilian stood solemnly by the riverside, deep in contemplation. Okay. So all this time passed, and it started to rain. So unlucky! It's raining! Let's hurry back! So unlucky, you say! How troublesome! The raindrops were beating down Shilian's face and clothes before he became aware of his surroundings. It's raining! Oh. When the people in the capital saw rain, they would drop everything to find shelter. Little did they know just how many were dying on the other side of Shanla for a rainstorm like this to come. A group of people with umbrellas ran past, and when they saw Shilian alone, getting soaked by the rain, they pulled him along and beckoned. "Young cultivator, why aren't you getting out of this rain? It's coming down harder." Dazed, he followed along to the shelter. Luckily, I saw the clouds gather when I came out today and grabbed an umbrella, or else I would have become a drowned rat. It's been too long since it last rained. The storm was way overdue, so it's going to be a big one. It really is coming down harder. At this rate, it's going to turn into a deluge. The raindrops were beating down. Shelian felt deeply that this was his home. This was the place that he was born and grew up, and those were the citizens he knew. While it's still light, we should hurry up and go. Shelian stood where he was. Young cultivator, are you not able to return home? The rain's quite heavy. Thank you very much, but what about you? We still have a couple umbrellas here that we can squeeze under together. Let's go, let's go. The man left an umbrella in Shelian's hand and ran back. I love the sound of their footprints. That's really cool. His eyes caught a glimpse of an inconspicuous shrine not too far away. He opened his umbrella and walked towards it in the rain. Upon closer look, the two sides of the small shrine doors were written with the verses, Body in Abyss, Heart in Paradise. It was the shrine of the Crown Prince. Oh, is this the little shrine that is in the OP with Hua Chong? Is this little shrine one that he's made for Shelian? And this red umbrella, is it a red umbrella? Is he carrying the umbrella to the shrine? Since 8,000 temples were built within only a span of 3 years, it was only natural that not every one of them would be as extravagant and breathtaking as one on Mount Taisang. Amongst the shrines, there were quite a few that were built by amateurs to fill the number and generate the excitement. Not only did they lack a donation box, but they also didn't have any shrine priests. The only things that they had were a clay statue, a couple of offering plates filled with assorted fruits and refreshments. Those with kind hearts would come by once in a while to freshen the plate a little, so that it could at least pass for a decent shrine. Well hidden in an area like this was such an inconspicuous shrine of the Crown Prince. Without stepping in, Shelian could already make out what could be described as a charmingly tacky Crown Prince statue. Exquisite clothing, a pale, round face with slightly pinkish undertone, and a silly smile. The statue looked like a big doll. If he didn't have so much on his mind, he probably would have laughed out loud. Oh no, Hua Chong's made this. I can't. In the past 3 years, Shelian had seen 3,000, if not 5,000 Crown Prince statues. There were none that looked exactly like himself. Even the most similar one was still 7 points off. As for the rest, they were either too ugly or too beautiful. A majority of the divine statues of the most heavenly officials were too ugly, and yet Shelian was the exact opposite. There were some that were beautiful beyond recognition, to the point where he himself was embarrassed. He didn't really take a good look at this clay statue to begin with. His eyes had glossed over it quickly but unexpectedly. A snow-white blur caught his eye and grabbed his attention. Grasped in the left hand of that crudely made clay statue was a flower white as snow. The pearl-white petals with crystal dew clinging onto them were beyond delicate. One could faintly catch a wisp of its fragrance floating in the air, lovely and endearing. The signature pose of the Crown Prince statue was sword in one hand, flower in the other. Said flower was held in the left hand, would of course be a finely crafted flower of gold, a flower of gems, a flower of jade. However, this was the first time Shelian had seen a real flower clasped within the statue's hand, and he couldn't help but lean forward to get a better look. Upon closer examination, he discovered the Crown Prince statue had probably held a clay flower once upon a time. Whether it fell due to the sculptor's poor skills, or if someone had intentionally picked it off as some form of a prank, only a small hole remained in the left fist. The little white flower just so happened to be placed in this hole. If there was a person that had especially picked a flower to fill the empty space within the statue, then that person was truly kind-hearted. Shelian's thoughts came to a halt when he heard a series of hurried footsteps. He hid. With the umbrella in hand, he lightly leapt onto the altar and then turned around to look down. Within the gray fog, a young boy barged in. The boy was no older than 12 or 13. His dirt-stained, patched clothes were soaked from head to toe, and his face was covered by filthy bandages. And his right fist was tightly clutching onto his left, as if protecting something important. It was only after he'd entered the shrine that he finally released his hands. A tiny, single flower, white as snow, was sitting in his palms. Yeah! Oh my god. Okay. Everybody calm down. We've just got Huachong here, all right? It's fine. It's fine. Everything's fine. I'm going to take notes later. We've got to see what this chapter is now. I'm going to take notes afterwards. No. To meet you in the mortal realm, to find flowers beneath the rain. 2. Shilian made a small sound as if he had just remembered something in the back of his mind. The face that was wrapped under layers of bandages inevitably reminded him of the child he'd met 3 years ago. But he wasn't completely sure. Pessimistically speaking, could that child still be alive after 3 years after escaping Mount Taisang? Just then the young boy came forward. He lifted himself up on his tippy toes and swapped the flower on the clay statue with the one in his hands. From atop the altar, Shilian could see it as clear as day. The petals on this new flower were fuller and even more delicate. It carried twice as many dew droplets, and from the strong fragrance, one could only be certain it was freshly picked. Could it be the sole reason for this boy to visit an inconspicuous shrine like this every day, just to replace the flower with a fresher one? Moreover, after offering the flower, the young boy stood in front of the clay print statue. Unlike the others who stubbornly wanted to kneel, he interlocked his fingers and silently made a prayer while standing. He actually followed Shilian's wishes. It had been 3 years. Among all of Shilian's followers that had prayed, there were officials, nobles, names that had traveled across this land, and talents that would even impress the heavens. Yet the one Shilian felt was the most sincere was actually this child. You will never meet someone as sincere as me. Oh my God, that just hit me. No, he wasn't lying. He wasn't lying. Who looked barely over 13. Moreover, it was a child who had probably been kicked out of those fancier golden temples simply because of his patched clothing and could only come to this kind of shabby, rundown shrine to offer his prayers. Truly an indescribable sentiment. Just then, more sounds of wet footsteps came from outside the shrine. A group of children with umbrellas rowdily ran past. At first, Shilian thought they were only passing by, but they circled back again. Acting like they discovered something extraordinary, one child clapped his hands. Wow, the ugly monster got kicked out again. Oh my God, this is all like Huachong thinking he was ugly. Oh no. They were all around the same age. Every one of them was taller than him and looked as if their parents had fed them well. There was probably a holiday coming up, and they were all dressed in new clothes with new shoes. I like Shilian doesn't realize what holiday's coming up because he's been too busy, right? They playfully played in the puddles around the shrine entrance. Their innocent smiles were full of life and void of any ill intent. It was as if they really didn't understand that ugly monster were awful words, and they didn't think their words were hurtful. They probably thought it was funny. The boy tightened his fist, but his fist was so small it wasn't threatening at all. Oh my gosh! Hey, ugly monster. Are you sleeping in the shrine again tonight? Better watch out. That mom of yours is going to beat the living hell out of you when you get home. Oh, the boy's one eye flashed with anger. I don't have a home and I don't have a mom. She's not my mom. Get out. Keep talking, I'm going to beat the crap out of you. You dare? Carefully, might just tell your dad again and let him teach you a lesson. Oh, right. You don't have a mom because your mom didn't want you. You don't have a home because your family doesn't want anything to do with you. That's why you only sleep in this pitiful shrine. Oh. And he lunged at them. For a scrawny kid, he sure could pack a punch. The loud cry had almost sent a couple kids running in fear, but the kid that originally started the fight held his ground. What's there to be scared of? We have more people. And that comparison to him fighting the 33 gods later, oh my gosh. Upon hearing that, the ones who wanted to run away returned and joined the fight, pulling at the boy's hand and feet. And Shilian couldn't stand it anymore. With a wave of his hand, an invisible force shot out of the blue and separated the boys. And a powerful wave of puddle water flew up from the ground and knocked the group of children off their feet. In the end, they were still kids. After falling to the ground without knowing why and getting a whole mouthful of muddy water, their new clothes were completely soaked. Now that they'd become even more filthy and uglier than the kid they made fun of, the happy laughter from before was replaced with loud wailing. They crawled up from the ground and ran away, sniffling with umbrellas in their hands. Shilian shook his head in disappointment. As a proper martial god whose job was to ward off evil ghosts and bring protection and peace, this was the first time he'd gotten tangled in this kind of juvenile dispute. Even after he'd chased away the wrongdoers, he didn't feel accomplished at all. His gaze returned to the young boy. During the chaos, the bandages on the boy's head had been yanked off halfway. The half-revealed face was swollen with blue and purple bruises. It was obvious they hadn't been caused by the brawl just now. Before he could get a better look, the boy had rewrapped the bandages without a word. He sat down by the clay statue's feet and hugged his knees close. Oh no. Shilian had wanted to come to this Crown Prince shrine to think. He had planned on summoning Feng Xin and Mu Qing to discuss an important matter, but the child that he had unexpectedly bumped into had drawn his attention. He sent out a summoning, then squatted down beside the boy and stared. Not long after, a rumbling sound came from the boy's stomach. The offering plate still had a couple of fruits and sweets, and although they looked dried out and they probably wouldn't taste that good, it was better than nothing. Shilian picked up one and lightly tossed it towards the boy. He wrapped his arms around it. Oh, he curled up, thinking that it was a rock. Oh, no. Oh, no, no, no. Oh. He picked up the fruit, dusted it off twice, and put it back on the offering plate. He'd rather endure hunger than eat the offerings on the plate. Oh. After that, he walked towards the door. He looked at the heavy downpour outside the shrine as if debating whether to venture out to find food. He went back and curled up on the ground beside the clay statue's feet. Oh, and then Mu Qing and Feng Xin arrive. Your Highness, how'd you find such a small crown prince shrine? Why'd you send out a call from here? What the hell is this kid doing here? Your Highness, is this a child that ran away from Mount Taiseng 3 years ago? I'm not sure. I don't know what his name was or what he looked like. The three surrounded the unsuspecting child and chatted. The boy on the ground shifted. As he wiped his face, he realized there was blood running down his nose and the corner of his mouth. Shilian felt he couldn't just do nothing. He said, let this child leave first. It's getting dark. The shrine isn't a good place to pass the night. Could it be that he has nowhere to go? I'm afraid that's the only place he could spend the night in. He has a home, though the situation there might not be great. Even so, this shrine isn't any better. If he leaves, then we can find something for him to eat. Also, he's injured. Your Highness, please excuse my frankness, but we don't have time to bother with these minor things. Did you call us here because you come to a decision? Oh my god! Okay, it's fine. It's fine. All the heavenly officials who reside in the upper court, there had never been one that would accept every prayer from all their devotees. With countless amount of followers, if one was to care for every single one of them, it would be exhausting, which is why, sometimes, they would turn a blind eye to those minor and less impactful wishes and pretend they didn't hear to lessen the workload. But because of Shilian's young age, with a body bursting with energy and passion, he had yet to learn how to properly prioritize. He walked towards the entrance of the tiny shrine with the umbrella that was gifted him by the pedestrians on the street. He slowly opened the umbrella. And on the ground, the young boy heard a noise and thought someone had entered and shifted slightly. But after thinking no one would bother him, he laid back down. Shilian placed the opened umbrella by the entrance. The young boy waited for the sound to disappear, and when he didn't, he saw a red umbrella leaning against the ground under the rain, like a lonely crimson flower that had bloomed by itself, and he froze in surprise. Your Highness, you've done more than enough here. If you're too obvious and he finds out, it would be troublesome. The boy ran back and shouted from behind them, Your Highness! They almost jumped in surprise and turned around. The boy, cradling the umbrella in his arms, had an eye that was reddened and filled with emotion. He lifted his head and shouted at the clay statue, Your Highness, is that you? Oh my gosh. He didn't know that Feng Xin didn't know Shilian had helped the boy chase away the other groups of kids and had even chucked a fruit at him prior to this. That kid is quite clever. He actually figured it out. Mu Qing, on the other hand, suspected that something might have happened before and eyed Shilian. The boy begged, If you are here, please answer my one question. From his place high atop the altar, Shelian would hear countless of pleas appear before me every day. When a sound becomes repetitive, it would numb the ear and eventually fade into the background. Even so, whenever he heard a voice like this, he couldn't help but drop matters at hand and perk up his ears. Mooching caution, your highness, leave it be. But he didn't speak. The young boy clutched onto the umbrella tightly with both hands, gritting his teeth. I'm suffering. Every day I wish I'd die. Every day I want to kill off everyone in this world and then kill myself. I'm living in agony. From a boy that couldn't be older than 13, shouting words like suffering and kill off everyone sounded almost ridiculous and laughable. However, hidden inside this tiny body was something explosive. Something that nurtured his rage and roars. What's wrong with him? Kill off everyone in this world? Is that something a kid could say? He's still young. When he gets older, he'll know what he experiences now is really nothing much. There are too many suffering in this world. Take Yongin's drop, for example. Name one Yongin citizen that has it better than him. There's no need to bother with this, Your Highness. Let's focus on our priorities. Perhaps. To another, the suffering of one probably looked like trivial matters. The boy was still looking up at the statue. His eye was becoming redder, yet there were no tears. With the umbrella in one hand, he reached out with the other and tugged on the clay statue's robes. For what should I live in this world? What does it mean to live? However, his questions were met by silence, not a soul to give him answers. It seemed the young boy had expected as much, slowly, and dropped his head. To his surprise, a voice came from above and broke the dead silence. If you don't know how to live on anymore, then live for me. Your Highness! The boy's head shot up, but there was no one there. Only a soft and gentle voice came from that clay statue. I have no answer to the question you asked. However, if you don't know the meaning of your life, then make me that meaning, and use me as your reason to live. Function and Muqing's faces looked as if they were about to explode, and they both reached out their hands to smother Shelian's mouth, sputtering, No more, Your Highness! You're violating the rules! The rules! Before they could fully cover up his mouth, he managed to shout out, Thank you for your flower! It's beautiful. I like it very much. I was about to cry, and now I'm going to go take some notes and try not to cry and try not to freak out. It's fine. It's fine. I nearly cried with these chapters. I don't know if y'all know this, but it's not easy to like get an emotional response, especially reading a book. Like watching an anime or donghua. Watching an anime or donghua, it's hard, but it happens. I've cried several times. I can count on two hands how many times I've probably cried watching an anime or donghua at this point. And then reading a manhwa or an manga, I can probably count on like two hands how many times I've cried. But I'm not usually an emotional person. Like inside, I'm internally screaming like 24/7. But I don't usually like emote the sad energy. But I was getting misty-eyed in that last chapter because it was really sad. And it wasn't just that it was sad, but it was just like all of the things so far in this story are all starting to click together. And I'm like, oh my gosh. Everything that is built up what Hwa-Chong is all making sense. Now, before we start talking about this, there is a picture in this set of chapters. Really great. I've got part of 73 pulled up, and I've got notes for chapter 71, 72. I just read through the whole thing. I didn't even stop and take notes. I was just like, nope, I'm going to read this whole thing. I couldn't stop. I was like, I've got to read this whole set, right? And then I went back and took some notes afterwards. And then I also went back and watched the OVA. Because as soon as chapter 73 was over, I was like, I've got to go back and rewatch the OVA because... from volume 1, because yeah, we're cutting back to the very end of volume 1 where Shilian had the conversation with Hua Chong, and he was telling him, he's like, I said this really dumb thing to a kid way back then where I told him that he could live for me. And I was like, and I've been debating when that was going to happen so far in these chapters, and y'all have done a great job of not spoiling me, and then it hits this chapter, and you're like, but yeah, okay, but before I start, one quick thing. There were a few moments in this set of chapters that I feel people have been hinting at, and so I was like, oh, this is what they're talking about. Please don't do that in future chapters, because I felt a little spoiled going into this, because especially someone was like, Hua Chong has a really bad backstory, and I'm like, I'm gonna find out, but I just felt like, I don't know, and that's not really even a spoiler, but it just like was a hint, and I was like, let me find out, you know? And then there's been a couple of, you know, comments that were just, and I think I even started the reaction with them, that I was like, oh, yeah, Like someone was commenting about the scarcity thing, and I was like, well, we addressed that here, so please, before I dive into these chapters, if you know I'm going to be reading a few chapters in the book, please try to go ahead and read them, and then when you make comments, either spoiler tag if you're not sure, or you're dead certain that it doesn't happen in the chapters that I'm reading or have not read yet. Because there was a couple moments here I was like, well, the comments kind of told me that. And so I was like, I don't want that to happen in the future. But that being said, oh my God, these chapters, like all the parallels from the end of volume 1. I went back. It's later at night because I went back and rewatched the OVA and was just sitting there going, like, Hua Chong is on a mission to subtly and not subtly let Shilian know that it's been him this whole time. But he's the reason that Hua Chong has been alive. He's the reason he keeps going. And not even the reason that he's alive because he's a ghost, but the whole reason he keeps going and doesn't destroy the world is because of Shilian, I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure the only reason Hua Chong hasn't killed everyone and burnt the world to the ground is because of Shilian. And that's a bit scary, but good thing. There's a lot to talk about in these chapters. A lot to talk about. And I didn't know if I wanted to bring Whiteboard Kun out or not, but I figured when we get to the Hua Chong stuff, I would want to bring it out. So I was like, well, I'll just go ahead and have it out here. And if I decide that I want to write anything on here, we will do that. But yeah, so Shilian visits the Goshi. He goes like straight to the capital, straight to the Goshi like he does. I like the idea that only the Goshi can see Shilian. Like, he has enough cultivation power that he can see Shilian even when he's not trying, right? And that makes a lot of sense, that once you reach a certain spiritual level, you can literally see gods. It kind of ties to priests, that you can see the Lord. It's great. It makes sense. But I like that the visual of the opening of chapter 71. I said this in the reaction. I don't think that the Donghua is able to do it justice. I don't think they're going to be able to. And I think Star Ember could, because Star Ember's an amazing artist. But just the idea of all those everlasting lamps and just like it all illuminated, and Shilian like the wind just billows through it, and Shilian like floats down. I put down here, fluttering down like a butterfly onto the altar. Fluttering down like a butterfly, Shilian, like the inspiration he's had for all of Hua Chong's things is all tying together, right? But him fluttering down like a butterfly to see the Goshi. And we find out that this Goshi Mei was the one that he spoke to about the prostrating rule, and he was able to talk to him. So we got that. And now Huckleberry's like, you've had your fun reading, now play with me. But yeah, so he goes down the wall and he questions his father's lack of doing anything. And I was all self-righteous in the last reaction, being like, well, why won't anybody do anything, and blah, blah, blah. And luckily y'all didn't spoil me too much on that, but it does make sense now. So I guess we need to put that up here, and we'll talk about this. So Shilian asks some important questions. He's like, hey, has my dad done anything? People are young and are suffering. Why aren't we doing anything? And the Goshi's like, yes, I told your dad not to do anything. And Shilian's like, why would you do that? And so the Goshi says, we don't need to be doing anything. It's pointless. It's not going to work. And Shilian, he thinks of all these ideas. He's like, well, we could build a canal, and we could irrigate, and we could send relief efforts and everything. Goshi's like, we've done that. It's not going to work. And when the Goshi said, it's too early, you ascended too early. And it wasn't just the fact that he didn't have enough world experience. He's like, you have too much connection to this world. You weren't ready to become a deity, to become a heavenly official. The Goshi says that basically what you need to do is that your heavenly officials need to have no connection to their homes. He's like, you're acting this way because you feel a connection to your home. He's like, and that's natural. But he's like, no. He's like, your people should have died out before you ascended. And I was like, oh shit. So there's this. It's crazy. But the Goshi's like, you ascended far too early, and now you want to help your people out. He's like, but you can't. You're not supposed to. So you should have ascended when your people were no longer something that you would have thought about. Because yeah, most of the heavenly officials that we know of have been around for so long, their kingdoms either are not there anymore and not an issue that they have to worry about, or their families and stuff have all passed on. So they're like, I don't have a personal connection to that kingdom anymore. Now I can just do my job as a heavenly official. And for Shilian, that's not the case. And you have to wonder, is that something that's bad luck? Was that bad luck that Shilian ascended too soon? So it just furthered everything out, right? So that he's like, your ascension comes with a price. And I like that note here that ascension, because as of right now, ascension has been led up to be this end-all be-all thing that you want to happen. But it comes with a price. Once you ascend, you don't have a tie to the mortal realm anymore. You've moved up the corporate ladder enough. You don't get to see your friends and family anymore. You don't get to have any involvement in your kingdom anymore. You're immortal, cool beans, and you can make an impact, but not in the way that Shilian wants to, right? And Shilian's just like, what do you mean I can't do anything? Well, what was the point of me ascending? And it's like, well, it's like, and he's like, not only that, but he's like, you're a martial god. You're not a god of anything else that would do any good in this situation. And Shilian's like, well, I want to help my people. And he's like, that's not how this works. He's like, you have a job to do, and you can't go outside that job because that's just not what you're a martial god, but you're not going to be able to save these people of Yongin. And the Goshi tries to just be kind of blunt about it. And he's like, you can't do anything here right now. And Shilian, he's just like, well, we have too many temples. He's like, there's too many temples. I didn't even want 8,000 temples. He's like, melt some of the gold down to build statues and do that and do the relief aid. And we can do it. So he mentions a lot of different ideas of what could be done. And so the ideas, he talks about like melting the gold to send relief funds. Well, we find out that doesn't work because there's all these checkpoints that they go to. And so at the checkpoints, the government and the other like officials there are taking from it. They're taking from it to where there's nothing left to reach the people, right? And we'll talk about that later, but Shilian gets really mad about that. Then we have the whole idea about the river and using it to irrigate. And he's like, we could make a canal. And I like the Goshi said, he's like, you think you have all these answers? Go out and see the river. Go check it out. The Goshi knows what's up. The Goshi sees the writing on the wall. And he's like, we just need to function as long as we can. And survive as long as we can. But I think the Goshi sees the writing on the wall that things are not looking good. But he's just like, what can we do? He's like, we can't do anything else, so we just got to ride it out and hope for the best and hope that it ends up okay. But he's like, Shilian, the things you're thinking of, we've already tried and they won't work. And I love that the Goshi says, I've seen your future and it's pitch black. Like, you have a horrible future. And God, that comeback line, though, where he's like, well, you're wrong because I only wear white. And I'm like, I was like, oh my God, Shilian. That comeback was absolutely amazing. I loved it. I loved it so much. But as nice as that comeback was, as great as it was, Shelian's questioning is like, well, what was the path to my ascension then? What was the point of me ascending if I can't save my own people? And Shelian's looking at it because he's frustrated, because he's, made this pledge to save the common people and he can't do anything. He feels like I'm a deity, but I'm powerless. Like, Shelian just has this myriad of emotions, and he's only 20 years old. He was only 17 when he ascended. So he's still so young, right? And the Goshi's like, well, you can't save your people. He's like, you can't act out. He's like, they will just drag you down. He's like, if you try, you're going to try to spread yourself too thin, right? He makes this point of saying, you can't save everyone. It's just not going to happen. He's like, you're going to spread too thin, and then the people will turn on you. And Shelian has this, he's like, no. He's like, the people love me. They're not going to turn on me. They'll understand I'm trying to do right and wrong. And Goshi's like, you don't know how people work. No, they'll turn on you. And we know for a fact as the audience that that's what happened. Was after the White Calamity shows up, which I'm waiting for that bomb to drop. After the White Calamity shows up and the human face disease runs ravage and Shelian can't save everybody, then at that point, they do turn on him. And it does all go downhill, and Shirong burns all the temples down, and they start making the statues that are of showing Shelian prostrating. And now the prostrating statues make all the more sense, right? Because now, when you think about it, you think of the prostrating statues, that's what Shelian told them not to do. And so what does Shirong do? He makes statues of Shelian prostrating before them. Oh my God. MXTX, what have you done? This story, I'm sinking into the rabbit hole further. Oh my God. It's crazy. And then the Goshi says after Shelian says that he has faith his people won't do that, the Goshi's like, your father's tried. He's tried to do things and it's not worked out. So he's like, you can go see for yourself about the river. Go ahead, check it out. He's like, but you just need to leave your father in charge. Let him make these decisions and be a king, right? That's all you can do at this point. He's like, that's all I can ask for you, right? And Shelian's like, well, fine, I'm going to go check it out and see for myself. And so he goes to check it out and realizes several things are problematic. Like, we find out about the whole relief funds, but he finds out that there's no way it would take too long to build the canal. It would take too long and too much resources that they don't have already to do it. And also the river's receding. So I watched a video a little while back because there's a water shortage crisis out actually in the western part of the US. And it's a very similar ordeal where the people that built this dam and built this thing assumed that there was more water than there actually was. So now it's kind of funny in a morbidly creepy way that now there's several pockets out in the western US that are facing the same problem where they think that they were going to have water and now they don't. And that's kind of the situation here where Shelian's like, well, crap, the river isn't big enough to give enough water to the people. And Shelian brings up that whole point. He's like, well, what can we do? Because Muqing and Fengshen show up. They've done their research, and they've realized that in the last 2 years, the western part of Shanla has experienced this major drought. And it's interesting. The past 2 years. Okay, so Shelian, again, ascended 3 years ago. And the drought started 2 years ago. Did the drought start because of Shelian and the bad luck? Is that part of this? Is that part of this too? Is that what's been happening? Are we going to tie this to Shelian's bad luck? Are we going to tie this to it? I don't like where this is heading. But yeah, so 2 years ago, the drought started. Oh, God. Oh, no. Oh, no. So the drought started 2 years ago. And now all that's left there are the poor and the handicapped that remain. Which on the outside, when you first say that, you're like, oh, just the poor and the handicapped remain. You're like, oh, well, that's not that many. And then you find out it's hundreds of thousands. And you're like, oh, that's quite a bit more than I thought, right? Because even the king says, he's like, if this had just been, something with 100 people, we could have done something. But hundreds of thousands is an entirely different story. And they said they've sent funds, but they went through all these checkpoints and everybody kept skimming off the top until nothing reached Yongin. And Shilian gets really mad about this. And he's like, well, then I'm just going to go take all of it back. But Mu Qing has been really, really cold and blunt at this point. But I kind of like this because I like that it's Mu Qing telling Shilian all of this, because Feng Shen kind of comes from a place of privilege, a lot like Shilian. Mu Qing was from an impoverished place. He knows, in a sense, what the people of Yongin are going through. And so for Mu Qing to tell Shilian all of this is really fascinating, because he's coming from kind of a place like the people of Yongin are. And he's like, look, he takes Lan Chuanchu's position. He's like, you don't need to be interfering in this. He's like, it's just going to make things worse. He's like, you can't take water and create it from nothing. You can't make the third cup. It's not possible. Because Shilian's like, well, we'll just get the river, the rain master, because we established that there was the earth master, there was the earth, wind, water, heart. No, there's earth, wind, water. Rain was separate. So the rain master is not the same master as the wind master's brother. They are two different people. Not the same. But you have the rain master, then there's the thunder or lightning master, like the thunder master, I think, the rain master, water, earth, and wind. So the rain master is someone different. So Shilian's like, well, we'll just ask them to go bring water. And Mu Qing's like, the rain master has to get water from somewhere else to bring here. So it's like a domino effect. He's like, whatever happens from here will affect where the water came from. So you're going to doom some other people just because these are yours? And that ties back to the Goshi saying, you have too much of a personal connection to Shanla. You need to let them go and just let things happen as fate has ordained it. And you don't need to take part in this. That's not your job. Your job is to protect against evil ghosts and spirits and keep the peace in Shanla. You're not supposed to help them farm and help with their agriculture, right? But Shilian, he's just so distraught by all of this. And then it's like, Mu Qing's like, you have a job to do right now. You have prayers you need to answer. You need to protect the realm and keep on watch in case they're attacked by an evil ghost. A giant ghost in white that could cause a big problem. So yeah, I feel like that's what's going to happen. Shilian's going to get so caught up in this Yongin business that Bai Wuxing's going to come down and be like, sup? And be like, I'm here. And then Shilian's going to be totally caught off guard and things are going to get out of hand. We're getting closer to it. I can feel it in my bones. I can feel it in my bones that we're getting closer to Bai Wuxing, and I'm terrified. And you know what? It's going to be such a tease if we get to that point and MXTX takes us back to the present. I'm going to be like, how dare you? But yeah, I was talking with someone, I think it was KixK, that was noting that, Modao Zushi had to walk so that Heaven Official's blessing could run, right? Because it's so true, the way that flashbacks are handled in this, but I'm just waiting for it. I'm waiting for us to just get right on the White Calamity, and then MXTX is going to take us away, because she won't let me have that. We'll see how it goes, but I'm going to bet that we're not going to see. If we see the White Calamity in this volume, I will be very surprised. I really want to, and I don't want to at the same time, but I feel like MXTX is going to be like, well, I could show you the White Calamity, but we'll save that for another volume, and I'll be like, no, because I'm not asking for this trauma in my life, but I want to know more about the White Calamity. But anyway, so Mu Qing basically says you cannot take on everything. He brings up this really good point that not only spreading yourself too thin, but he's like, you're going to burn out. He's like, you can't take on, because they establish in these chapters that Shilian, he's young and spry and has lots of ambition, so he's trying to take on all the prayers all the time. And Mu Qing's like, you already have Feng Shen and I helping you. Eventually, you're just going to get burnt out. You need to stop, slow down. And Shilian's just trying to do it all at once. It's just what he's trying to do. So Feng Shen even says, we're only curing the symptoms. We're not curing the root of the problem. and that is the water shortage. And so it would take too long to bore the river, and the river is already drying up as well. And it functions, distant waters cannot put out near fires. Which is, it's like by the time you get the water over there, half of it's already gone and you've done nothing. So it's just, they're like, we really just can't do anything. And Shilian wants to contact the Rainmaster, but we established that Shilian hasn't made any friends in the last 3 years. Shilian has kind of kept, with the exception of Junwoo, he's kept away from the heavenly officials in the heavenly realm. And I feel like that ties back to the Windmaster saying, like, you've got to make friends in the heavenly realm. Because, again, to ascend as human, to fall as human as well. These deities are still, at their core, humans who build relationships with one another. And the Windmaster's like, yeah, these relationships are important because, you scratch my back, I'll scratch your back. He's like, that's why I'm so popular. I make all these friends, and then I help them, and they help me. Whereas with Shilian, he's not made any friends. He's been so consumed with his job, he's never been in the heavenly realm. He hasn't talked to anybody. So I feel like Muqing and Fengxian are kind of like, well, you could go ask the Rainmaster, but are they really going to help you? Because they don't owe you anything. So that's what I'm afraid of. I'm afraid Shilian's going to finally get a hold of the Rainmaster, and the Rainmaster's going to be like, well, I'll help you if you do X, Y, and Z, and it's not going to be something Shilian wants to do. We'll see. We've not gotten the Rainmaster yet, so that might be a lot of fun. And I don't know if the Rainmaster from then is the Rainmaster now. I don't want to know, but that'll be interesting to see. But basically, it's kind of hinted at in these chapters that Shanla is dying. It's slowly falling. It's slowly drying up. And I feel like the Goshi knows this. That there's this idea that Shanla is slowly drying up. They established that the east side or the west side of Shanla is drying up, and the east side is close to a body of water. And so that's why they've been able to hold on right now, because they're close to a body of water. They have resources. They can do trade with other countries. And so things are a little bit easier. And so the people that are wealthy can just buy the goods from other places, even if they can't grow their own. But there's this like looming ominousness that is being established in these chapters that Shanla's on the downslide. And the king kind of knows it, and the Goshi kind of knows it, and they're just kind of biding their time and surviving the best they can. But Shilian's just now learning about this, and he's like, wait a minute, what? Hold on, what? And just things have gone. But again, 2 years ago, things have been starting to get bad, which is tying to his ascension and the bad luck and all of this. But the Goshi says the king has made a choice. And he needs to be the one to decide this. The decisions, and Muqing agrees. Muqing's like, the decisions need to be left to the king. You've got a job to do. Let your dad do his job, right? And Shilian, he's like, I need to think. He's like, you deliver water to the people for as long as you can and try to help the people here. I'm going to go back to the capital and try to figure something out. And I'll call you when I figure out a plan. And Muqing's like, okay. But he's like, you do realize that what we're doing is temporary. We're delivering water to a handful of people is not going to do anything. It's like throwing a cup of water on an entire cart full of firewood that's on fire. Woo! So, water cannot come from nothing. And so then we get chapter 72. Qirong is not in this chapter, which is both good and bad. I think the chaos Qirong brings is amazing, but it is not needed for this part of the story. This part, we did not need Qirong. No, he's mentioned once, but we did not need him here. But this whole thing with Shilian's parents. Shilian's seeing from the other side now. Again, I keep going back to the Goshi saying you ascended too early. Because Shilian is seeing stuff that he shouldn't be. And not just the stuff with Yongin, but the stuff about his parents. Because he goes to see his parents. And now this part isn't bad. He finds out that, the parents put on a front in front of the people of the kingdom, but then behind closed doors, they act like an old bickering married couple. And I kind of like that. I like the MXTX because with the exception of like in Modao Zushi, you have, in Modao Zushi, you have Wushin and Chang's father who him and his mom, Madame Yu, do not get along at all. And it's very open, but it's a very open relationship that doesn't go well. Like the people, there's no behind closed doors. Like it's out in the public that they don't get along well. Whereas with the other couples, we really don't get that idea of how they are behind closed doors, with the exception of like Yao and his wife, because that's part of the plot. But in this case, I like that MXTX shows that, yeah, Shi Lian's parents are like any other set of parents. They bicker like an old married couple. She's like trying to give him a head massage, and he's like, "Oh, woman," and he's nagging at her and blah blah blah. But Shi Lian gets to see that, and he's like, "Oh yeah, my parents are just like any other set of parents. They just put on a front for everybody because they're king and queen." But then the rest of this chapter, I feel like it's stuff Shi Lian is not meant to see, and he shouldn't see, but he does. And so he finds out that his dad dyes his hair. His dad's been going to the temple with dyed hair because he doesn't want to show Shi Lian that he keeps getting older. And that's like, ugh. And then the queen, she talks about how she says that Shi Lian he was the worst at missing home. And I'm like, and that she's not come and seen them in years. And she's afraid that he'll never come back and see them. And so Shi Lian starts to get filled with guilt. And the king reveals his more human side and like starts getting aggravated and stuff. And Shi Lian's like, where was this? My dad was so stoic and cold and distant. And now you see him for like the human that he is. He's like, where was this whole time? But he talks about how he's worried about Yongin and all these refugees coming in to the capital. And the queen tries to like take on the very optimistic approach. She's like, oh, well, they can come in. Just we don't know what'll happen. They could come in and abide by the laws and be perfectly fine and just help out with the kingdom. And the king's like, yeah, they could, but what if they don't? He's like, I only have so many resources in this kingdom. And we know as the audience by this point that the Goshi and the king might have an idea that things are going to get really dire in Shanla before long if the river keeps receding. And he's like, we only have so many resources. And he's like, what happens if things don't go well? He's like, it's my job and my duty as king to not take those risks, which is quite different from Shi Lian, right? Shi Lian's all like, let's do this. Let's do all these things. And the king's like, no, we've got to pick and choose and be responsible. And I can only do so much. Like the king has a very pragmatic approach to it. And he starts to get frustrated. And when he tells her to stop talking in the reaction, I was like, that was cold. But then when I went back and reread it, I was like, I've seen my parents do the exact same thing where they'd be like, well, then we're just not going to talk about this anymore. And what makes me feel better about it is that the queen in the next line, she's like, I know you're mad. It's all right. We just won't talk about this anymore. Like they literally are like a married couple, right? But the king and queen, they say, this is our problem. It's not Shi Lian's anymore. He's ascended. And the way he described the king, he's like, his wings have hardened and I want him to stay carefree in the heavens. He should fly to his heart's content. So basically, the king and queen, they basically just want Shi Lian to stay out of it. Because they feel like it's just going to weigh him down if he knows. And then we as the audience are like, he's right there. And it is. Like his heart hardens and he gets a lump in his throat. And he does. And Shi Lian feels awful, right? He feels awful because he's like, well, I can't go see to my parents now because if they just see me, they're going to be stressed out. So I can't do that. And then what gets me is that Shi Lian, he's not worried about breaking the rules. Shi Lian's like, I don't care if I break the rules. What gets me is that he doesn't want to confront his parents because he doesn't want to stress them out. And he doesn't know what to say to them. He's like, even now, he makes this really cool comparison to the real world where it's like, if you've been away to college or you've been away from your family for a long time and you come back and you kind of don't know what to say because you don't know how to relate to them in that moment because that day-to-day is no longer there. Like I've experienced that. You go away to college and you come home and you're like, hey folks, and there's that distance there. And it's not anything malicious or ill-intended, but it's there. And so it's just like, what do you do? And eventually you kind of get back in the groove of thing, but for Shi Lian, it's a lot harder because he's a heavenly official. He can't just strike up a conversation with his folks anymore. It's only supposed to be in a state of emergency. And what does he say, right? What does he say that hasn't already been addressed by the Goshi or by Mu Qing and Feng Shen. That's the problem. And it's like, well, so he doesn't know what to do. He doesn't want to stress his parents out. So he disguises himself as a cultivator and he goes around the capital trying to piece together information. And he manages to piece together some things. And what's crazy is he notes that he remembers back to like boating in the river and realizing over time it was starting to recede more and more. And Shilian's like, the warning signs have been there. So it may go back beyond 2 years ago. It may go back even further. Shilian talks about like boating through the river and things were slowly receding even then. And now they've just gotten worse in the last 2 years. So Shilian's like, all the warning signs were there. We just haven't been noticing them. And it's like, And so then the rain starts. Now, my theory is, I think that it could be a number of things. I feel like the question is it fate? Is Shanla's fall just something that is meant to happen and it's just the course of events of history and it's just doomed to happen and there's really nothing Shilian needs to do about it? Just let it run its course. Let nature run its course and stop this kingdom and then another one will flourish beside it. We know that Yongin somehow ends up superseding Shanla, but we don't know how yet. So that's going to be interesting to see go down. But yeah, is it fate? Is it the heavenly realm? Is it a heavenly official trying to claim a territory? You know, we talk about how the one, which that's not even claiming territory, that's like claiming devotees. So that may not be it. That may not be it. I'm going to rule that one out. But it could be the heavenly realm messing with it and saying that Shanla has to fall for this certain thing to happen. We don't know. Or could it be the will of a ghost? We don't know. But in whatever the case is, it's something that is on a path to happen. And Shilian, there's not much he can do about it. It's like, it's going to happen whether you like it or not. And Shilian's like, well, no, I don't like it, so I'm going to prevent it from happening. And it's like, oh my God. But yeah, so the rain starts and Shilian realizes how much people take for granted that rain. He's like, the people over in Yongin would kill for this rain right now. And people are running away from it like they're afraid of getting their clothes wet. And so he starts getting soaked in it because he just feels so dejected. And then this couple feels bad for him and they offer him this worn down umbrella, which at this point we do not know is red. I want to make a big point. They don't reveal that it's red until chapter 73. And I was like, oh my God. So anyway, let's talk about Hua Chong and Shilian. All right. And all this stuff here. Right. And we're going to do like the past and the present. I guess this could go for both of them. Do my little red string of fate there. So yeah, the red umbrella that was given from Shilian to Hua Chong. I really hope that the red umbrella Hua Chong has in this story is the one that Shilian gave him, or it could, I suppose it could be the recreation of it because that one was a worn out umbrella. But I just love that it symbolizes what, oh my God, we'll talk about this when we get to it in the chapter. But he finds this tiny shrine, right? And he finds this tiny shrine. And they talk about in the novel that Shilian has always thought that the statues of him in the temples were either too ugly or too pretty. He's like, they either are ugly to the point where they don't even look like me, or they're beautiful to the point where they really don't look like me either. But he notes that the statue in the tiny shrine that Hua Chong has built has been charmingly tacky. And Shilian would have laughed out loud if he wasn't already thinking about all these other things. Which is really cute that little Hong made this statue of Shilian. And Shilian was like, well, that's really charming. It was like just the perfect Goldilocks right in the middle. Not too ugly, not too pretty, just charmingly tacky. And that he thought it was really cute. It had like a silly smile and looked like a big doll. Which is funny because you have Hong making the statue in the shrine. So you have the statue in the shrine. And then you have where he paints the picture later. And the picture is perfect. Yeah, go figure. I also went back to the OVA and watched it, and in the OVA you see the shrine, but the statue in the shrine is not kind of like the novel describes. It's a little bit prettier. So, but I figure they have to do that for the time being because that part of the story has not been revealed yet. So there's that, right? And then in the palm of the hand, the Shelian talks about how lots of people would put there'd be a sword in one hand, and in this hand would be a flower. And for the most part, it would be flowers of like gemstones, flowers of gold, flowers of rubies or gems. But this is a beautiful white flower, a real one that has been carefully placed right there. And you can't see it because whiteboard coon's in the way, but on that book, in the first book, there's the white flower as this instead of the red pearl. There's a white flower. Like, tying back to volume 1! So anyway, I have a feeling that with every volume, I'm going to have to rewatch the season 1 until season 2 comes out. I'm going to rewatch the season of the Donghua, and more stuff is going to come out each time I rewatch. Oh my gosh. So yeah, but he's been replacing the flowers as soon as they start to wilt. So, chapter 73. Shelian he suspects that this is Hong, who would have been about 13 at the time. So Shelian's about 20, Hong is about 12 or 13, and he suspects that it's him, but he's not really sure how he could have lived all this time. Well, he's been living with the shrine. He's been living for Shelian, right? He just didn't have it confirmed for him that that's what he should be doing, right? He just had faith. And there's this moment where we see that he has been following Shelian's orders between now and here. Right? In the present time, he does tell Shelian if he's kind of off base about something or if he disagrees, but he still respects Shelian and follows his orders. Like he's praised standing up instead of prostrating himself, which Shelian is amazed by because he says he's the only one that's listened so far and done what he asked. And it was kind of spoiled a little bit in the comments leading up to these chapters, I guess, from last week, but it's okay. It's not a big deal, a little bit, but I like this idea that, again, it ties back to Hua Chong when he was in the OVA and in volume 1 telling Shelian, be like, you'll never meet someone as sincere as me. Meaning like, I follow your orders to a T and I take everything you say with utmost sincerity. Oh, the callbacks. And so it's established that Shelian thinks that Hua Chong might have been kicked out of other temples because of his appearance. And so then these kids show up. And again, these kids, like, causing this lasting trauma on him, right? We've had Chi-Rong's trauma, and now we're getting to Hua Chong's, where the idea of him being ugly. And that the kids call him that. Like, if you've been called that for years, it starts to sink in, especially if you're a little kid, and he starts to believe it, right? And we find out after the fact about, we'll talk about the bruises. The bruises and the bandages. But yeah, so these kids show up. They call him ugly. Shelian gets kind of mad. He's like, what a bunch of kids. And he says it that they call him ugly, but they treat it like it's totally normal. Like this is just an everyday occurrence. That calling him ugly is just like breathing to them. And that moment where it says that Hua Chong, he makes his tiny little fist like he's going to defend himself. I'm like, imagine this kid grows up to be Hua Chong. But yeah, so the kids tease him, and they say that there's a mom and a dad involved, but Hua Chong says that's not my mom, and I don't have a home, and he's been sleeping in the shrine. So there is a question of, okay, is there still... My theory was, and I don't want to be told the answer to this yet. I'm sure we'll find out. We're getting bits and pieces as we go. I'm sure we're going to find out more as we go. But my theory is that his dad is still alive. He's maybe remarried or gotten with another woman since Hong's mother has died. And he can go back home, but he gets abused there. Because he talks about having the bruises on his face and he hides them with the bandages. I think that his family abused him and he just covers his face up because he thinks he's ugly. Which is really sad. It's like, I was getting like misty-eyed. I was like, this is awful. Like, I feel really bad for him. But he sleeps in the shrine because his family doesn't care about him. And the kids say they just basically... The one kid is going to fight Hua Chong and the others start to run off. But he's like, no, I've got more people. I can beat you up. And they all get encouraged and confident and come back to beat him up. And so it's this parallel of Hua Chong being outnumbered as a kid to later when he fights 33 gods by himself. Back then as a kid, he was getting outnumbered and bullied and beaten up. And then later on, he's able to face over 24 deities on his own. The parallels, y'all. The parallels. But Xilian finally has enough. He's like, okay, this is too much. I can't watch this anymore. And he uses his official's powers to make this big gust of wind come in and splash the kids and knock them all down. And because they're little kids, they get all wet and disgusting and they just end up crying and running off, leaving Hong Hong there. And it shows him slowly putting the bandages back on his face and like sitting with his knees curled up in the shrine, which is so freaking sad. And just everything about this chapter is so sad because he goes, sits there and his stomach starts growling and Xilian's like, well, kid, you need some food. And they see the fruit on the offering plate and he's like, well, that's probably not the best thing to eat, but it'll get you by. So he knows the kid isn't going to take it off the offering plate. So he uses his powers to throw the fruit at him, being like, okay, you'll pick it up off the ground and eat it, thinking maybe it's a sign. He dusts it off and puts it back on the plate. He'd rather starve than take the offering off of his plate. That faith that he has in Xilian, y'all. That he would rather do that. And it shows that he thinks about going out in the rain to get food, but then he double guesses and is like, nah, I don't want to go out in the pouring rain, so I'll just sit here in the shrine and be hungry. It's like, oh my God. Right? So from this point, Xilian's just like, well, what do I do? And then Feng Xin and Mu Qing show up. Of course they do. They show up. They recognize him immediately as being Hong. Xilian's like, I'm not sure if it's him. Mu Qing and Feng Xin are like, yes, that's him. I love that Xilian's memory is not the best. And Feng Xin and Mu Qing are like, no, that's him. And so the way that they go about it is very interesting because you have Xilian. And Xilian, you have three situations. Xilian wants to make sure that Hua Chong gets home. Which again, it ties back to the Paradise Manor where Hua Chong's like, this place isn't a home. I don't like it. He's like, I'd rather be at your shrine. The shrine's like home to him more than this manor. And Xilian just wants him to get home and he feels bad when Paradise Manor burns. But Hua Chong's like, that place has no meaning to me. I'd rather go to your little shrine again and stay there. So again, craziness. So Xilian's like, I want him to go home first. I want him to be able to go home and do that. Feng Xin says that what if he has nowhere to go? If he has nowhere to go, he should stay at the shrine. If he's here, again, Xilian wants to make sure he gets home to a safe place, and he thinks the shrine's not good enough for Hua Chong, which is its own thing. Feng Xin wants Hua Chong to make his own decisions and says, no, let him do what he wants. If he thinks this is the best place to stay, then it's the best place to stay, which is very in line with Feng Xin's character. Mu Qing is like, why are we even worried about this? Mu Qing's like, we have other matters, which ties to the present time because Mu Qing has nothing to do with any of these adventures so far. Feng Xin has been following Xilian around and making sure everything's okay. But yeah, all their personalities kind of match up. But Mu Qing is like, we have more pressing matters. Don't we have a thing with Yongin to worry about? Like, didn't you call us here because you made a decision? Wasn't that something important? And so, I'm going to get back to the chapter here now. Xilian's like, no. He's like, I don't want this kid to be stuck here all by himself, not able to go get food. And so they make a point in the novel to say that most heavenly officials do not answer any prayers at all. They're just overwhelmed. But Xilian, in his young, spry youthfulness, has made a point to try to answer as many as he can. And he opens up the umbrella. And this paragraph here, this paragraph here where he opens up the umbrella and the raindrops create the pitter-patter sound. And the boy hears the noise and thinks someone entered. And so he shifts slightly like he's expecting somebody to hurt him. But then he waits for the sound to disappear. And when it doesn't, he gets suspicious and looks. And this line, when he saw a red umbrella leaning against the ground under the rain, like a lonely crimson flower that had bloomed by itself, he froze in surprise. Everything about him is inspired by Shi Lian and his actions. Everything. Everything. The butterflies, the flowers, the umbrellas. It's all inspired by Shi Lian. And it's like, oh my God. Like Hua Chong, he is inspired by Shi Lian and his actions. Okay, and that ties back to the red umbrella. The being a crimson rain sought flower. I can't, y'all. I can't. And so then the boy grabs the umbrella and Mu Qing's like, Your Highness, you've done more than enough. It's too obvious. When he finds out, it's going to be troublesome. He's like, it's really obvious that you've made this for him. And so then Mu Qing stands back, or Mu Qing and Feng Xin and Shi Lian are all surprised when the boy, he cradles the umbrella in his arms, like he has the umbrella holding onto it. And the eye that was reddened is filled with emotion. And he shouts to the clay statue, Your Highness, is that you? Now, Feng Xin thinks that Hua Chong's very clever. He's like, wow, that kid's clever. He figured it out. And Shi Lian's like, Feng Xin doesn't know that I actually helped this kid earlier with the fruit and the kids. So he's probably put two and two together. I love that Mu Qing eyes Shi Lian like, you've done something else, haven't you? He doesn't say anything, but Mu Qing sees right through Shi Lian. But Feng Xin's like, wow, he figured it out real quick. I'm like, and the boy says, I want you to answer my one question. And Mu Qing's like, please don't. And he says, I'm suffering, and every day I wish I'd die. Every day I want to kill off everyone in this world and then kill myself, and I'm living in agony. Now, there's a lot of things in that one sentence. Besides what we're about to talk about with Feng Xin and all them. I instantly thought that is like Hua Chong now. Hua Chong's like, I could kill off everyone in this world and then myself because I'm in such agony. But I need something to live for. And it's Shi Lian. It's like, I feel like Hua Chong's like, the only reason I haven't destroyed this world is because of you. Because you keep me going and keep me sane. You complete me, Shi Lian. But yeah, it's no wonder at this point why he becomes a supreme ghost. He's like, he's suffered in agony. And I think my theory is that when this whole Bai Wusheng thing goes down, when this whole White Calamity thing is going to go down, and Shanla's going to fall, and Shi Lian's going to get demoted, I feel like that's when Hong is going to become a ghost. And he's going to go on this war path to make himself the strongest ghost that there is. Because he wants to protect Shi Lian, who protected him. That's my theory. Now, I don't want to be told if I'm right or wrong. I'm sure it's going to be, even if I'm remotely in the same realm, there's going to be like 1,000 complications because, again, volume 3 of 8. You know, I'm sure there's going to be a lot more. And we're at this point of volume 3. And this is after chapter 73. I'm like, oh my God. So, yeah, we got a long way to go. But I think that Hua Chong, this explains how he became a ghost because he's just living in agony and Shi Lian's the only thing getting him through it. And Feng Xin says that, like, well, he's only 13. Like, him saying he's living in agony. It just feels like, you know, you see a lot of older adults that are like, when a kid is like, I'm living in agony, they're like, you just haven't experienced the world. Wait till you go out and see all this other stuff. Then you'll really think that you're lucky. But no, I kind of hate that because it's like, no, a kid suffering is a kid suffering, regardless of how old they are, right? It's still suffering. So you could be self-righteous and kind of condescending and be like, well, when you're older, you'll understand true suffering. But no, I fully believe that there's lots of adults in this world that have not suffered the same things that Hua Chong has at this point. So you can't really say that, right? But that makes sense that Feng Xin says that he's like scoffing about it because Feng Xin is very pragmatic like that. And it's a very black and white thing. And then Mu Qing says, well, he's still young. When he gets older, he'll know what he experiences now is nothing much. Truer words have never been spoken, right? Truer words. I was like, oh, crap. No, you all are right. He's going to experience a lot more after this. And so Mu Qing is trying to shift Shi Lian away from Hua Chong, being like, hey, this kid, he'll learn that what he's going through now is no big deal. Let's focus on our priorities, which is the thing with Yong'an, right? But at this point, Shi Lian's like, well, if we figured out that it's a lost cause, and there's nothing I can do with Yongin, and I need to let my dad control things like y'all said. Here's something that I can control. Here's something I can help with. This is just one person, not hundreds of thousands. And he's like, to another, the suffering of one look like trivial matters. But the boy says, what should I live for in this world? What does it mean to live? And so he drops his head, and that's when Shilian says, if you don't know how to live anymore, live for me. And I love that Function and Muqing are like, Your Highness, no! And I was going to point out, this is the picture that they give us of the 3 chapters of this moment at the end of chapter 73. And it's of little Hong standing there with the umbrella amongst this little pudgy statue. Look at the pudgy statue of him. Isn't it cute? It's this pudgy statue. And I want to get a close-up on Shilian's face because it looks beautiful. Yeah. Where he's just sitting there looking so ethereal, being like, you can live for me. And Muqing and Function are like, no! And then you see a little Hong with the tiny little beginnings of a ponytail, like looking up at him with the umbrella. And him saying like, and they're like, you're violating the rules. The rules. And he's like, and thank you for the flower. It's beautiful. I love it very much. No big deal. No big deal. Just, no big deal. So yeah, these two, the most unlucky duo in history, have influenced each other over 800 years. Like, Function and Muqing warning him, being like, you're violating. I'm amazed. The one person that Shilian violates the rules for, it's not his parents, it's Hua Chong, to tell him to keep living. And the sad thing is that we know that things are going to get really bad from this point on. And Shilian's going to regret those words, saying that he said them out of arrogance. Because now it makes sense why he apologizes, why he says that he was so dumb back then to Hua Chong. He doesn't apologize. He said he was dumb. Because he's like, I was so arrogant then. I was so foolish. I thought that I could save the world and save everybody. And he's like, and I know now that was like a pipe dream. He's like, I shouldn't have said that. Without realizing that Hua Chong's the one affected by those words. And Hua Chong's like, yeah, what you said was dumb, but it was brave. And you should have said it. And he's like, and I like people that say they're going to save the world. Oh my God, I love it. I love that Hua Chong's like, we need that optimism. You weren't wrong for saying it. He's like, you saved my life through it. But then how do you become a ghost? What ends up happening? So many questions. But I also want to make note that this volume has to deal with water. And what are we scarce of at this point in the story? So yeah, I'm like on cloud 9 from this chapter, from this set of chapters, because I'm like, I feel like I'm connecting dots and it's so rewarding. Again, I have been feeling very daunted by how long this story is. But MXTX, it's like she knows. She's like, I realize you're going on a journey that is very long. So as we go, I'm going to keep threading back and looping back to the first volume. And we're going to keep going back to it. And it's going to make more and more sense as we go. And I'm like, okay, MXTX, I'm trusting you. I'm trusting you. But yeah, this is amazing. And just the umbrella, the crimson rainsop flower, tying to Qi-Rong, and it's Qi-Rong and the visit that Hua Chong gave to him that earned that name. It's like, everything's connecting in the best way possible. And Shilian wearing white. We still have Ruhe. We still have Ruyi, him being explained. We don't have Yiming yet, obviously, because he's not a ghost yet. We don't have any of that. We don't have the red string of fate, all that stuff. It's going to come in due time, I know, but I'm so excited. So I hope you all enjoyed this reaction and discussion. I feel like I'm just rambling at this point because I'm on cloud 9 and I need to sit back and marinate in these chapters and hear y'all's comments. And then see chapter 87 of the Manhua for next week. So that's what I'm going to do. But please no spoilers, hints, or clues. But I'm really excited to dive into chapters. Next week, I'm going to be doing chapters 74 through 76, which is a pretty big chunk. but it's going to be parts 32 and 33, chapter 74 through 76. So, but yeah, and the one thing is, y'all, once the Manhua is done, and I don't have to wait on the Manhua, because right now I'm kind of pacing myself. I want to catch up with Manhua. I don't know if I'm going to be able to stop myself from reading ahead once the Manhua is over. So, we'll see. Right now, this week was hard. It was hard waiting a week, but I feel like chapter 70 ended on a pretty... It ended with Shelian going to the capital to find answers, but it was like not a cliffhanger. And then in this chapter, it's not a cliffhanger, but... Oh my God. So, I'm curious to know your thoughts down below, but I hope y'all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah! I'll be back next week with chapters 74 through 76 of Heaven Official's Blessing. Bye.